thinking about this today. Why is it that a non-native speaker can memorize like 10,000 English vocabulary words, right?
Oh, easily. And they get their pronunciation perfectly dialed in, too.
Exactly. They master all these incredibly complex verb conjugations, but then they can still completely ruin the mood of a party by using just a single three-letter word incorrectly.
It is honestly one of the most fascinating phenomena in linguistics, I think.
Today, we are really looking at these invisible tripwires of English. We are talking about the hidden architecture of the language, you know?
Right, the subtle, unspoken rules.
Yeah, the rules that native speakers just intuitively step over every single day. But learners, they constantly and frustratingly stumble right over them.
We tend to view language learning mostly through the lens of pure data acquisition, right?
Yeah, like you're just downloading a software update.
Exactly. You buy a grammar book, you memorize the rules, you learn the vocabulary, and you just kind of assume that fluency is the mathematical output of all those inputs.
Right. Input equals output. That's not how it works in reality.
Not at all. As any language learner will tell you, the real barrier isn't usually the complex vocabulary.
Like, it's not the multisyllable medical terms or, I don't know, obscure legal jargon.
No, it is the deceptively simple foundational words. The ones that seem so basic they almost defy definition.
Which brings us to the core mission for our deep dive today. We are going to deconstruct two of the most ubiquitous, seemingly straightforward words in the English language.
Two verbs that you, the listener, probably use 100 times a day without even a second thought.
Right. Make and do. We are going to figure out exactly why these two tiny verbs trip up so many intelligent, capable learners.
And maybe more importantly, what these words reveal about how we, as humans, subconsciously categorize our own actions.
Yeah, it gets deep. So we are pulling our insights today from a really intriguing excerpt from a language-focused show called The Art of Making and Doing.
Which is a specific segment from the Speak Like a Native English podcast.
Yeah, that's the one. And this source material is just fantastic because it grounds this highly abstract linguistic concept in a very human, very relatable narrative.
It doesn't just give us a dry list of grammar rules, right? It gives us a protagonist.
Right. We have a guy named Bruce, and Bruce is an English learner.
And in the excerpt provided, Bruce is simply trying to tell a story. You know,
there's a normal conversation. He is recounting his morning routine to someone, just listing off the things he accomplished that day.
Yeah, moving through his schedule.
Right. And right in the middle of this totally mundane explanation of his routine, he confidently announces to the world that he, quote, did a cake for a party.
He did a cake.
I mean, it's just so funny.
It is such a beautiful collision of concepts. Yeah. And it is absolutely crucial to understand from the outset that Bruce's slip of the tongue here isn't just a funny, trivial mistake.
Right. It's not like he just sneezed while talking.
Exactly. It's not a mispronunciation, and it isn't a case of a forgotten vocabulary word either. Bruce knows the word make. He knows the word do.
Yeah, he has those in his inventory. But in this specific instance, he chose the wrong one.
And that choice acts as a perfect window into the rigid, underlying architecture of fixed English expressions.
Because when Bruce says he did a cake, he is exposing a structural divide in the language that most native speakers aren't even aware exists.
They just feel it. They don't know it.
It is instantly jarring, right? To a native ear, did a cake sounds completely wrong. It's almost absurd.
It really is.
But before we get to Bruce's specific cake disaster, and we are absolutely going to analyze the cake, we first have to map out the landscape he is trying to navigate.
We really need to understand the structural rules of the language exactly as the source lays them out.
Because the highlight of this text is really about the struggle of mastering these fixed expressions.
It specifically points out the contrast between two very common everyday phrases, right? Make a mistake versus do homework.
Yeah, and it frames this entire discussion under the overarching goal to speak like a native, which is why they titled the endeavor The Art of Making and Doing.
And that framing, calling it an art, is deeply intentional on the part of the podcast's creators.
Oh, totally.
They are trying to elevate the conversation way above just rote memorization.
I do have to push back on that framing just a little bit, though, or at least I want to challenge the premise.
Okay, let's hear it.
If language is fundamentally a set of structural rules, right? Like if we are talking about syntax, vocabulary, and fixed expressions that either are correct or incorrect, why call it an art?
You think it's too generous?
It just feels a bit lofty for memorizing verb pairings, doesn't it? Like, to me, memorizing vocabulary is like buying paint.
Okay, I fall.
You go to the art supply store, you buy a tube of cerulean blue, you buy a tube of cadmium red. That is just the acquisition of materials. It's inventory.
Right, you have the tools, but you haven't made anything.
Exactly. But knowing when to use make versus do without thinking, actually speaking like a native in the flow of conversation, that is the actual painting.
I see where you're going with this.
It requires an intuitive feel for the canvas. You can't just slap the paint on by a mathematical formula because the formula doesn't account for the subtle shades of human experience.
You really have to understand the medium you're working in.
Yeah. That analogy actually works perfectly to describe the conceptual leap the source material is asking us to take.
So let's look closely at those two examples from the text, right? Do homework and make a mistake.
Okay, let's break them down.
If you try to analyze those through pure, cold logic, the system completely breaks down.
It does.
Why do we use do for one and make for the other? They are both physical or mental actions.
Right. They both require effort. They both happen in time and space.
Exactly. If I am sitting at my desk, I am expending cognitive energy for both of them.
Yeah, the physical reality of the situation is nearly identical. I have a pencil in my hand. I'm looking at a piece of paper. I'm thinking.
But the underlying philosophy of the words, the way the English language categorizes the nature of the action itself, is entirely different.
This is where it gets really cool.
What's fascinating here is how the language forces us to distinguish between execution and creation.
Execution versus creation.
Yes. Let's break down doing. In the context of these fixed expressions, doing implies the execution of an existing task or obligation.
Okay, think about homework.
Right. Homework is, by its very nature, assigned to you. The parameters already exist before you even sit down at the desk.
Yeah, the worksheet is printed, the math equations are formulated, the reading assignment is delineated by the teacher.
The architecture of the task is already built. Your job is simply to execute the process.
You are traversing a path that has already been paved for you.
Therefore, you do the homework.
Okay, that makes sense. It is all about completion. It is about fulfilling a pre-existing requirement.
Yes. Execution, completion, maintenance. Those are do words.
So what about make?
Well, making is an entirely different category of human action. Making implies bringing something completely new into existence.
Okay.
And what's so incredibly counterintuitive for learners is that this applies even if that new thing is negative.
Wait, like a mistake?
Exactly. Think about a mistake. A mistake wasn't there until you created it.
Oh, wow. I never thought about it like that.
You forged that error out of thin air. You authored it.
That is wild.
There was no pre-existing template for the specific, unique way you just messed up that math problem.
Right. You went off the paved road. You introduced a completely new reality.
Yes. The reality in which that specific mistake exists. Therefore, you don't do a mistake. You make a mistake.
That is a phenomenal way to look at it. I never really thought about a mistake as an act of creation.
It really changes how you view language, doesn't it?
It totally does. When I mess up, I am bringing a brand new, highly original disaster into the universe.
You are the artist of your own failure.
I love that. I am the artist of my own failure. It is a generative act, even if it's an unwanted one.
You are authoring the error. And this distinction between execution and creation is exactly why the source insists on calling it an art.
Right, because to truly speak like a native, you cannot just rely on a dictionary definition.
No, you have to internalize this philosophical distinction. You have to look at every single action you take in life and instantly, subconsciously categorize it.
You have to ask, is this an execution of an obligation or is this the creation of something new?
And the challenge for someone like Bruce is that this binary categorization isn't a universal human trait.
It's just a quirk of certain languages, right?
Absolutely. This is the absolute crux of the learner's dilemma. In many languages, there is only one primary verb that covers both of these concepts.
Really? Like which ones?
Think about Romance languages. In Spanish, you have the verb hacer. In French, you have faire.
Oh, and Italian has faire, right?
Exactly. These verbs encompass both the act of doing and the act of making.
So it's all just one big bucket for them.
Yes. To a speaker of those languages, action is just action. Whether you are executing a chore or creating a masterpiece, it falls under the exact same linguistic umbrella.
The cognitive categorization is completely unified.
Precisely. So when a learner from one of those linguistic backgrounds comes to English, they aren't just memorizing two new vocabulary words.
Right. It's way deeper than that. They are being forced to literally split their perception of human action down the middle.
They have to bifurcate their entire worldview. They have to start drawing a line between maintenance and creation, where no line existed in their brain before.
That is so tough. They have to adopt a binary view of action.
And that requires an immense amount of cognitive load. It's not just a matter of translation, it's a matter of shifting your psychological framework.
Yeah, because when a native English speaker looks at a situation, their brain automatically filters the action into the make bucket or the do bucket.
And they do it before they even open their mouths. It is an instantaneous neurological sorting process.
But for a learner, that sorting process requires conscious, deliberate thought every single time.
Which is exhausting.
I want you, the listener, to just pause for a second and think about the tasks you have lined up for today.
Just look at your mental to-do list right now.
Are you currently executing obligations, or are you creating new outcomes?
It's a great question to ask yourself.
Because what we are talking about here isn't just a dry grammar lesson. This linguistic rule actually acts as a philosophical lens for your own life.
Think about the difference in how it feels. When you say, I need to do the laundry, or I have to do my taxes, you are executing maintenance tasks.
Yeah, you are just keeping the baseline of your life running.
But when you say, I'm going to make dinner, or I'm going to make a plan, you are bringing something into existence.
You are generating value. The language we use silently dictates the perceived value and really the fundamental nature of the energy we put into the world.
And that silent dictation, that underlying psychological weight of the words, is the exact trap that our friend Bruce fell into.
Which brings us right back to his story, because now that we understand this dividing line, right, the grand chasm between executing a task doing and creating something new making.
Right. Let's look at the exact environment where Bruce's brain just completely short-circuited.
Because the source material is very specific about the context here.
It explicitly notes that Bruce's mistake happens while he is explaining his morning routine.
Yes. The setting of the mistake is just as critical to understanding the error as the mistake itself.
It really provides the psychological context for the linguistic failure.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I really want to dig into that environment. Did the very nature of a routine set Bruce up to fail here?
Oh, almost certainly.
Because a morning routine isn't just a random assortment of actions. It isn't a blank canvas. It has a very specific, very heavy psychological weight to it.
It absolutely does. A morning routine is, by its very definition, a sequence of automated habits.
Right. You wake up, you brush your teeth, you take a shower, you make the bed, you commute to work.
You are not reinventing the wheel every morning. You are not tapping into deep creative reserves to figure out how to put toothpaste on a brush.
No, I'm barely awake when I do that.
Exactly. You are relying on ingrained muscle memory to get you out the door while your prefrontal cortex, the conscious decision-making part of your brain, is still booting up.
So in linguistic terms, the morning routine is the ultimate, undisputed domain of doing.
It is the epitome of checking boxes. I did this, then I did that, then I had to do this other thing.
You are just executing a string of pre-existing, non-negotiable tasks.
And this explains the why and the how behind Bruce's mistake. It all comes down to cognitive momentum.
Cognitive momentum, I like that.
When Bruce is telling his story, his brain is firmly locked into task execution mode because he is verbally walking through this highly automated routine.
He's reliving the sequence of events.
Right. And when you are locked into that rhythm, your brain naturally and subconsciously reaches for the linguistic tool that matches that psychological state.
And the primary tool for that state of automated execution is the verb do.
Exactly.
I kind of think of it like driving on the highway.
Okay, how so?
Well, imagine you're on a massive interstate. You've got the cruise control set to 70 miles an hour, and you've been driving straight for 3 hours.
Sure.
The road is flat, the scenery is completely monotonous, and your brain essentially goes on to autopilot. You are driving, but you aren't really thinking about driving.
Right, you're just maintaining the current state.
But then suddenly, your GPS tells you to take a sharp, unexpected off-ramp. Your brain is so accustomed to going straight, so lulled by the momentum, that making that sudden adjustment requires a massive, immediate spike in conscious effort.
You have to snap out of the trance, grip the wheel, and manually execute a complex maneuver.
Exactly. Bruce was on cognitive cruise control. He was so trapped in the momentum of his own automated habits that he was completely blinded to the linguistic off-ramp that was required for the next part of his story.
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize the cognitive load involved here, because language, at its core, really reflects our state of mind.
It is a mirror of our internal psychological landscape.
When we are stuck in the monotony of a routine, everything feels like a chore. Everything feels mandatory. Everything feels like a do.
Yeah, the psychological state of a morning routine is the absolute antithesis of creative thought.
It is pure utility. It is about survival and maintenance, not creation and joy.
I think everyone listening can relate to that feeling, right? Think about when you are having one of those weeks where you are just grinding it out.
Oh, we've all been there.
You wake up, you go to work, you answer emails, you come home, you sleep, and you repeat it. In those moments, you aren't making a life. You feel like you are just doing the days.
You're executing the absolute minimum requirements.
And Bruce, as he tells this story, is verbally trapped in that exact same grind. The words he chooses are actively reinforcing the monotony of the narrative.
And that cognitive trap is exactly what makes the climax of the source material so incredibly illuminating.
Because we finally arrive at the exact moment where Bruce's automated, monotonous routine collides head-on with a special event.
It is the moment the cruise control fails, resulting in this ultimate linguistic misfire.
The cake.
The cake.
It all comes down to the cake.
The source highlights this pivotal moment. Bruce, deep in the rhythm of his morning chores, accidentally says he did a cake for a party instead of made a cake.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because I want you to just imagine how deeply absurd and jarring this sounds to a native English ear.
It's completely unnatural.
Picture the scenario. Imagine you are invited to a dinner party. The mood is festive, the lighting is warm, there's music playing in the background.
People are laughing and connecting. It is a space of celebration.
Right. And then the host walks out from the kitchen. They are holding this beautiful, towering dessert, intricate layers covered in frosting, candles glowing.
A real masterpiece.
And they set it down on the table, look at all of their guests with a perfectly straight face and say, "Enjoy, I did this cake."
It completely deflates the moment. It drains all the warmth right out of the room.
It absolutely does. It is almost comical how much it changes the atmosphere. Because suddenly, presenting this beautiful dessert sounds like a mundane chore.
It sounds like they scrubbed the toilet or took out the recycling.
Yeah, or filed their taxes. Rather than offering a real labor of love, I did the laundry, I did the dishes, I did the cake.
It equates the act of baking, which is fundamentally an act of culinary alchemy, care, and generosity, with sweeping the floor.
It flattens the human experience completely.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we really have to look closely at the role of the party in the source text.
Right. Why does the text specifically mention that the cake was for a party? It isn't just a throwaway detail.
No, a party represents the exact opposite of a morning routine. A routine is solitary, it is automated, and it is largely mandatory.
But a party is social, it is spontaneous, and it is celebratory.
It is a deliberate, orchestrated break from the routine of daily life. And therefore, preparing cake for a party requires creation, effort, and intention.
It is the very definition of making. You are bringing something joyful into existence that was not there before.
You are adding value to the world.
Exactly.
You are gathering raw ingredients, flour, sugar, eggs, butter, and through effort and intention, you're transforming them into something entirely new.
Something that has never existed before in that exact form.
You are not executing a pre-existing obligation assigned to you by a boss or a teacher. You are creating an experience for other people.
But by using the word did, Bruce accidentally but completely stripped all of the joy, the creation, and the artistry out of his contribution to that party.
He practically industrialized the cake. He turned a warm, creative human act into a cold, robotic obligation.
And this moment perfectly encapsulates exactly why the source titled the show The Art of Making and Doing.
Bruce didn't just fail a grammar test here. He didn't just pick the wrong entry in a dictionary.
He failed the art.
Yes. He took the cold mechanics of a routine, the utilitarian do, and blindly applied it to an act of celebration and creation.
Going back to our earlier analogy, he used the completely wrong brush on the canvas. And the resulting image is just jarring.
And the result is a picture that looks fundamentally wrong to anyone who intuitively understands the medium.
It's an incredibly poignant example of how deeply our vocabulary is tied to our emotional landscape.
When native speakers hear, "did a cake," their brains immediately flag a semantic anomaly.
Right, because the emotional tone of the verb do does not match the emotional expectation of the noun cake in the context of a party.
There is a cognitive dissonance that happens instantly.
It is wild to think about how much raw power a single verb holds. Just think about that for a moment.
A single wrong word, 3 letters, DID.
It didn't just break a syntactic rule. It didn't just make a sentence grammatically incorrect. It entirely changed the emotional tone of Bruce's story.
It took us, the listeners, out of a place of warmth and celebration and dumped us right back into the cold drudgery of a Tuesday morning commute.
It really erased his humanity in that moment.
And this raises a really profound question about how all of us communicate.
Yeah.
Not just non-native speakers trying to learn the rules.
It forces us to examine our own relationship with language.
When we choose our verbs, whether consciously or subconsciously, we are signaling to the listener how we value the action we are describing.
We are telling them whether we view our own lives as a series of obligations to be endured or a series of creations to be celebrated. Yes. Okay, let's bring this all together.
Let's do it.
We started this deep dive with what looked like a very simple, dry stack of language rules. Just a short excerpt from a podcast highlight reel.
Make a mistake versus do homework.
The exact kind of grammar table you just completely gloss over in a high school textbook.
Yeah.
But by looking closer, we discovered that these fixed expressions aren't just arbitrary grammar rules thrown together to make life miserable for learners like Bruce.
They are not arbitrary at all. They are deep linguistic categorizations of the human experience.
As we saw through the analysis of Bruce's cognitive momentum during his morning routine and his infamous collision with the party cake.
Right. Make and do represent the fundamental philosophical divide between creating something new and simply executing a habit.
So what does this all mean? It means that language isn't just a tool for describing the world. It is the operating system of our thoughts.
When you set out to speak like a native, when you are trying to master any new language, or even just trying to become a more mindful communicator in your native tongue.
You aren't just memorizing a dictionary.
No, you are adopting a specific way of viewing human action. You are learning to see the world through a binary lens of creation versus execution.
And if you can master that distinction, if you can learn to navigate that divide with intuition and grace, you are not just speaking fluently.
You are speaking with intention. You are aligning your words with the true nature of your actions.
Exactly. You are mastering the art. So I want to leave you with a final thought to chew on today.
A little homework, but the good kind.
As you go through your own day today, whether you are commuting to the office, working at your desk, or heading to a party this weekend,
I want you to listen very closely to the verbs you use to describe your own life to others.
pay attention to your own internal monologue. If you catch yourself saying you are doing your hobbies, doing your passions, or doing your relationships,
You might want to stop and ask yourself a very important question.
are you truly engaged in the art of living, or are you just treating your life like Bruce's morning routine?